Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Well, again, welcome to the first of many Startup Grind events here at Startup Aggieland. Once again, I'm Christopher, and I'll be doing the interviewing tonight. We're very excited to have Larry Warnock here tonight with us. He graduated from A&M in class of 83, and he's worked in the tech space quite a bit since then in several companies, including Uniplex, Documentum, Zilliant, and Vignette. More notably, he was the CEO of Phurnace Software, which was acquired by BMC in 2009. And today, he's the CEO of Gazzang, which is a security encryption software company based in Austin, Texas. And I actually had the pleasure to work with Mr. Warnock the semester of my senior year, and really have the utmost respect for Larry. So the way this interview is going to work is we'll do about 45 minutes of just questions I have prepared, and then we'll do about a 15-minute Q&A at the end. So be thinking of some questions along the way. So to get started, tell us a little bit about your time here at A&M and kind of what you learned here.
Okay, so 4 years down to 25 seconds. So, as Christopher said, I'm class of 83. I was pretty involved in campus. I was in the Corp of Cadets, Ross Volunteers. I was in student government. Actually was the chairman of the judicial board, the J board student government my senior year. So I got really involved in the A&M experience, which actually probably gave me as much, if not more, exposure and experiences that I later used in my business. I am a graduate with a marketing degree, so I was in the School of Business, but at that time this beautiful maze campus was not built yet, so we were wedged into little places around petroleum engineering classes the whole time. I'm also, when I graduated, I was in the first group of Buckwire Spirit Award recipients, which is now, if you're aware of it, an award for seniors that are involved in A&M. The very first inaugural group, I was in that group. My experiences at A&M really helped shape what I've done in my career. In building businesses. I've spent time in sales roles, marketing roles. I'm currently a CEO. This is my second CEO opportunity. I was a venture capitalist for a period of time at Austin Ventures, which is the largest venture capital firm in the Southwest United States with several billion under management. But as we go through some of the questions, I'll kind of share some of the connections of things learned at school and classes to what I'm doing now. So is that a good A&M snapshot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now that we have a little bit of background about your time here in Aggieland, tell us a little bit about what you do at Gazzang and what Gazzang does as a company.
Okay. Gazzang's an early stage software company. We have 40 employees, but that's up from 20 employees when Christopher was an intern for us. We've been out in the market for about 3 years. We raised our first financing from a series of angel investors, and then after we got some momentum and got the basic core concept built, we raised institutional money from Austin Ventures and Silver Creek Partners out of Dallas, and we've grown the business. We're now in the process of raising what's called the Series B, or our second institutional round of funding. What Gazzang does is we have a cybersecurity offering that helps secure data in the cloud. So everybody knows that the cloud just basically means computing done somewhere else, and you use that capability, that service, or that data access. Well, that data about you is stored somewhere, and companies that maintain that data or capture it want to protect it from hackers. And what our software does is in the cloud encrypts it and then stores a key, a cryptographic key that will unlock what that data is, so that only those with authorization can see your web history, your credit card information, etc. This is a huge problem right now, and if you read the papers, everything from Target, credit cards, Neiman Marcus, to also NSA, giving of information, global terrorism, nation states going after data. The protection and privacy of data is a huge topic right now, and we found a really interesting, good niche to do that. We're based in Austin, Texas. We do all of our development here in the United States, with some exception. We have an outsourced QA department in the Ukraine. And as we go through, I might talk to you a little about this trend of outsourcing overseas. That's going on quite a bit in India, China, and Eastern Europe. But Gazzang fundamentally is a software company. Early stage, we started with just 2 people and an idea, and we built it up. We now have a real revenue stream and brand name customers that you guys have all known.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I was talking to Larry before, and he mentioned that there were only 20 employees when I worked with him less than a year ago. Now they're up to 40 plus. So just a testament to what they're doing in Austin. So next question, take us through the day-to-day operations in the life of being a CEO.
Okay, so I'm going to do it in the context of an entrepreneurial startup, because that's more relevant to what all of you will potentially someday do. So I'm sure what I do as CEO is very different than what the CEO of Ford Motor Company or General Motors does in any given day. But in a startup, as a CEO, the first thing I'd say is just about everything that comes through my door is a totally jacked up mess. Because I have very competent people that solve problems every day, but if they can't solve it or there's conflict of how to solve it, it bubbles to me. So quite frankly, if you don't consider yourself a problem solver or able to deal with crap, then CEO route's not for you. Because quite frankly, most of my day is unwinding bad situations. So if it's gotten to me, it's probably pretty major. It has strategic impact, or people are fighting, or can't agree, or whatever. So most of my day-to-day is really putting out fires, or answering, or solving questions about direction and strategy. So that's kind of an overall theme. But more specifically, it's really interesting to me. Now, when I was sitting there where you guys are sitting now, said, okay, one day I'm going to go through my career and I'm going to be a CEO. I never came out of college with the CEO mission. It just sort of happened, and I was lucky enough in 1983 to kind of fall into the tech industry. So you got to put this in context. This was before the IBM PC. Okay, so the tech industry had not really taken off. It was a pretty big risk. These companies, Apple was probably about 100 employees at the time. Netscape didn't exist. Google didn't exist. Facebook. It just wasn't really an industry. But what I found to be interesting that as being a CEO is each and every day I actually touch finance, engineering. So even though I can't write code, we are a software company and it's our factory. That's how we build things. I deal with engineering issues, marketing issues, operations, and investment issues. Because as a CEO of a startup, quite frankly, your most important job is raising money. Is raising money so that all the other really smart people can do what they do. So I'm an enabler to make sure we don't run out of cash before we have enough momentum in the market. So I kind of touch all of that. So when you're here at A&M and you have an opportunity in an elective, get a broad base of just some basic concepts. If you're in business school, get exposure to what distribution and engineering is. Monitor a computer program. If you're going to go into the software industry and you don't understand what programming is, go monitor a class, don't even get a grade. So you understand the basic jargon. The next thing I want to say is, in a startup, so how many of you, well, I know that the guy in the back is, but how many of you are in a startup company at the same time you're in school? You actually have a business. Okay. So I'll share that you know this already. The ups and downs are crazy. We go from absolute euphoria on Wednesday to Friday staring into the abyss, like, what in the F are we doing? This is going to be a disaster of epic proportion, and everybody aboard is going to be killed. It's like flying a plane that isn't actually totally assembled, and you're just trying to tighten bolts, as they rumble. So the ups and downs are absolutely crazy. I personally get a kick out of that. That excites me, and I find that empowering. It scares the hell out of a lot of people. But you should know, if you're going to do a startup, it is not all roses. There are a lot of startups that fail, but even the startups that succeed failed probably more than once before you heard of them. So along that line, I got a couple of stories I want to share with you. And it's one thing I want you to take away is I want to bust this myth of startup overnight success. You're getting that from blogs and news media and movies. Very, very few startups are an overnight success. Show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of Angry Birds? Again, it's everywhere. They got a freaking TV show, right? They have lunch boxes. You know you've made it when you have a lunch box. By the way, so when the Gazzang lunchbox comes out, I know I've arrived. Angry Birds. It's written by a company called Rovio. It was their 52nd game. The first 51 failed. It was their 52nd game. So you know them as Angry Birds, the overnight success. Out of nowhere, it took them 8 years. So they had failure after failure for 8 years, and Angry Birds was their 52nd game. Pinterest, ever heard of that? They almost went bankrupt 3 times. Their advisors and VCs encouraged them to throw in the towel and quit because they had such low user adoption count in the early days. And the founder had a passion and a dream and stuck with it, and now you know it's a household name. But it took a long time, and they were actually told by those around them to throw in the towel and give up. So my point of all this under the CEO, what do I do is the CEO question. Part of my role is to keep all the troops going in the same direction and motivated in a common vision that we share, and then try to provide guidance through those ups and downs that are absolutely going to happen. So then I have one last point on CEO, which is more a general comment, and I didn't have anywhere else because I got the questions in advance, so this isn't all off the cuff. Not that good. So I couldn't find anywhere else to cram this point in, so I'm putting it in here. It's a little bit of a shift. I hear a lot of executives and a lot of young people that are doing a business or are very involved. They say, I'm really good at multitasking. I'm calling that out as bullshit. No one's good at multitasking. Because you even find, if you're driving down the road and you're talking on the phone, your reaction time has been proven to other traffic to slow. What you should be good at is task switching. It's very different. So as a CEO, I spend 4.5 minutes on the cap table. I then shift and have a 6-minute problem on our QA. I then have to deal with a sales problem because an account is angry with us. I then have to take a call from an investor. I then have to review a press release to make sure that we're spinning the story, but not spinning it so much that it's a flat-out lie. Marketing is fantastic at that. And then I'm back to something to do with an employee who's all jacked up because our IRA choices suck. Bang, bang, bang. But what I found, and it's not that I'm some genius, is I can laser beam focus on something and then switch and laser beam focus on the next thing. Some people call that multitasking, but that's really not what it is. It's task switching, and if you're going to do a startup, get good at that. Being able to turn it off and change. It's like switching channels on a TV. Trying to do 2 or 3 things at once, I have never in my career met someone that's really good at doing 3 things at the exact same time. Therefore, multitasking. They're really not. They're task switching. So that's kind of a takeaway for you is if you're good at task switching, then a startup might actually be a place for you.
A great description of what the day-to-day operations are like. You mentioned a little bit about there was not a lot of technology in '83 when you graduated. So, kind of take us through how you got interested into the tech space.
Thanks, Chris. Man, it was kind of by mistake. I wish I could tell you I was sitting in the chair you're in and I had my whole life mapped out, and what I was going to do and what I wasn't going to do. And that's just not the case. In fact, I read a really good book recently called Lean In by the Chief Operating Officer of, is it Facebook? Yeah, Facebook. She said, do not look at your career as a ladder, look at it as a jungle gym. You're going to go up, to the side, down a bit, over, up, and you will advance your career by doing it as a jungle gym, not in one path. So you may get a degree in mechanical engineering, but may end up running a software company. And you have to just be willing to move things around. But this is related to the technology, so, and how I came into it. So when I was here at A&M, I did take computer science classes. It was mainly BANA, which is business analysis, so it's stat. And we had to go run computer programs over at the Computer Science Center. There was no, you have to understand, I know it's so hard for you to fathom. So now I'm, the voices of your parents. I'm of their generation. There was no computers at home. You had to go to this computer center and you carried this box of punch cards. So the programs were on paper cards about this big. And they had 80 columns. And depending on where the hole was in the card, that was a programmatic statement. So everybody remember the election with the hanging chads in Florida? That's a punch card. A little piece of paper punched through. So what was so frickin' funny back in the day is when you and your buddy were walking to the computer center at 8 o'clock, is to knock that box of cards out of his hands because they're in order. And there's about 900 of them. So they're numbered, so then you have to sit in the grass under the light putting it back together. So that's 1983 computer humor. So, yeah, you guys were crazy back in the day. Old Oregon was crazy. But my first exposure to computing was in that computer center, but it's so different from what I ended up doing. What really influenced me is I had a part-time job at the ROTC building. It's called the Trigon. You guys might know where it is on campus. And I actually was just kind of the errand boy of the secretaries there. And they had this little machine that was a word processing typewriter. It had no screen, but it would store up to a paragraph at a time. And that's when I first got exposed to technology. Then I went through the placement center here at A&M, and I got several job offers out of the placement center. I interviewed with Accenture, but I did not have a good enough GPA, so they passed me, because they hire wicked smart people. A lot of my friends went there and built great careers, but they have a high bar, as they should. But I interviewed with Accenture, but I didn't get called back. But I got a job offer from Otis Elevator, so they make the elevators in high-rise buildings. Next time you're in an elevator, see who makes it. Let's see, Otis. A commercial real estate company in Houston. A company in San Antonio called Clark Checks. They print the magnetic checks in your checkbook when you write a check. Like none of you have one. I know I don't. Thank God I didn't pick that industry. It's dead. And then a computer company out of Boulder, Colorado that is no longer around, but called NDI. And they offered me the opportunity to get 10 weeks of training to teach me the computer industry and fundamentals of selling skills, etc. And so I literally was weighing those together, and you're like, elevators versus early stage technology in the early 80s, what were you thinking? It was not clear to me then what was about to happen in technology. So I took this job in Boulder. I went up there and got training. They taught me a lot. And then in '85, 2 years after I graduated, the personal computer revolution and explosion took off, and it was never the same. Venture capital started to flow into California. That begat mini computers, which begat the internet, which begat mobile phones, which begat all these other technologies that you now take for granted. And so my interest in technology was, it was a strange, non-existent field when I got in, but you guys are in such an interesting spot. Now I do know that Startup Grind is not just about technology startups. It could be a restaurant, it could be sports equipment, whatever, that's fine. But the reason why there's so many startups in technology, it's really, really simple. It's because there's an industry called venture capital. There's money for it. It's really hard to get someone else's money to start a restaurant. It's real easy to use someone else's money to start a technology or software or an application company. So, long story short, that's where my interest was. I kind of fell into it. And then once I was in the computer industry, I bounced around. I lived in Boulder, as I said, lived in Silicon Valley, lived in Houston. My family and I are now in Austin. We love it. I have a huge maroon and white Aggie flag on a flagpole in front of my house. It drives everybody freaking nuts. I love it. So kind of back to the technology, quite frankly.
Awesome. Well, it's pretty neat how quickly industry can change over just a short amount of time. On to the next question. What's been your favorite part of working in the tech space?
Okay, so favorite part is the innovation and change. It is always on the move. So imagine if I had picked the elevator industry. Has there been a fundamental breakthrough in elevator technology since the 40s? No. The only thing that's new about it is it now has a computer that runs it. The new part is the industry I, by happenstance, landed into. The innovation and change in my industry is just phenomenal. And because you're living it and you were born into it, I don't know if you really grasp the pace at which it has moved, but even more exciting, the pace it's going to move. So let me just give you an example, for instance. So in my lifetime, I was born in 1961, the integrated circuit was invented and commercialized. We put a man on the moon, invented computers, and now we have these mobile phones that for several $100s is a GPS device, is a communication device, it's a digital camera that not only takes stills, but it takes motion pictures, and it has more computing power than it's over 1,000 times the computing power of the computer on the Apollo spacecraft that landed on the moon. So just as a frame of reference, so who has the new iPhone? It's the 5, right? The 6 is coming out. Who has a 5? So we know how much memory and storage you have in that? Can anybody know the little number on the back? 16 gigabytes. Okay, 16 gigabytes. The computer on the Apollo craft that landed on the moon had 2K of memory and 32K of storage. And that has happened just in my lifetime. You guys, if you don't have a smartphone with a screen on it, raise your hand. Okay, that's embarrassing. Next time you go to, don't do that. Next time you go to a seminar. It's 100% of the population over 10 years old. And it's done, in other countries, it's the only form of communication because they never strung landlines for telephones. The first iPhone came out in 2007. Now, you probably were in grade school or middle school, most of you, when that happened. But I don't know if you really understand how quickly this has happened. Here's what I think is so exciting about it. So imagine you sitting in this chair, okay, when you're 50 years old, and exponentially draw what's possible from where you are today to then. It will be even greater than the exponential curve that I've lived through. It's increasing at an increasing rate. We have seen nothing yet on raw innovation, and it's incredibly exciting. And so my little corner of the tech world, little Gazzang in Austin, Texas, to be part of this is we're watching what's in history. In 200 years, I'll write about this. The Industrial Revolution will get a paragraph, and what we're living through will get pages of changing science, industry, health, longevity. So what I love about the industry is just the rapid change and innovation, because I'm still learning. Something comes out all the time, and I would go nuts if I was in an industry that wasn't evolving.
Awesome. So we mentioned at the beginning about your time with Phurnace. So just tell us a little bit about that time and how you got to the point of selling it.
Okay, so what he's referring to is a company called Phurnace Software. It's spelled with a PH, P-H-U-R-N-A-C-E. Crazy cool name. We have flame as our logo. Get it, Phurnace. And the founder, I was not the founder. The founder brought me in to be a CEO. It's a great story about the name, first of all, and I'll also tell you where Gazzang came from. So, little sidetrack on Phurnace, the name, then I'll tell you Phurnace, the software company. It was started by two guys, neither one of them me, but brilliant engineers who had invented a cool piece of technology, but had no frickin' idea how to take it to market and find customers. Because it turns out inventing the technology, while it's really important, if you don't get customers, it kind of doesn't matter. So back to the point of the gentleman that kicked off the day with Accenture, we're looking for big markets. So total addressable market, is it big? And do you have something that can stand out and be different? And will someone eventually pay for it? They may not pay for it right out of the gate, like Facebook, but eventually Facebook has to make money, and they now actually have turned the road and are spitting off a lot of cash. Okay. Phurnace. So these two wicked smart engineers have developed a way to deploy applications into web app servers. Specifically, at that time, it was WebSphere, WebLogic, and JBoss. If any of your computer folks know, those are web application servers. If you know Apache and Apache Tomcat, that's web application servers. So they had invented a way to very quickly deploy applications. And I'll talk about how we grew the company and ultimately sold it. But the name is one of the developers, Robert. He worked at a software company and was building software for large IT environments, information technology environments. And he was right in the bubble, and the bubble popped. You don't remember that. Some of you in the room do. But technology was on a rocket ride like it is now, and then it popped and it crashed in 2001. Very few of you were there to see it. It was horrific. Layoffs, companies went out of business, VCs clammed up, they stopped writing checks. So this guy, very smart developer, got laid off. He said, F this. My stock options aren't worth jack. I was told I was going to be a cajillionaire. I was going to have a Ferrari by the time I was 26. And it didn't happen, so he said, this bullshit, I'm out. I'm getting out of the tech industry. So he, in his wisdom, decided to start a record label. But a unique record label that was going to do girl punk bands. Because he evidently felt there was a hole in the market for girl punk bands. So he created a record label and he called it Phurnace Records. But Phurnace with an F was taken, so he wrote a program to go through the entire dictionary and respell words phonetically and spit out a name and then also look on the web and see if the domain had been taken. So he wrote a program, it went through phonetically, and the word furnace with a PH was created, the domain was there, so he called it Phurnace Records. Needless to say, so he hired his first all-girl punk band. It's all excited, they're ready to go. He then actually is ready to do their first recording session. He's also gotten them a couple gigs on a little tour around Texas. He was in Austin at the time. And the day that they were supposed to record, the band broke up. They got in a fight. He has no fallback band. He has no songs for this record label. Damn. I guess I'll go back to tech. I'll start a software company. And since I already own the domain, Phurnace.com, it shall be Phurnace Software. So that is how we became Phurnace Software. And then he and another developer, for a year and a half, built a piece of code that automated a very laborious process that IT people were living at the time. And in fact, it was sort of a problem he was living. So there's a message in there is, solve a problem or do a startup in something that you know. You have an incredible interest in it, or you know a lot about it. Okay? The successful startups have founders that have familiarity with the space or the problem. So if you want to start some kind of a software company to help downhole drilling, and you've never worked at a petroleum company, bad idea. You're just not going to understand how the industry would adopt the tool. So he solved an IT problem. They had mumbled around for 18 months, built a great product, but didn't know how to get it out to market. So they turned to me and asked if I would come and help them build a company. So we made a deal on how the ownership of the company would be split up with them as the original founders, me coming on board. We went and raised some venture capital, and then we took it to market. And it was a wild success. From first money in to exit was just shy of 3 years. And we were acquired by BMC Software out of Houston, Texas. They then did really well with that product. And we made a lot of people a bunch of money, including the two founders becoming very wealthy young men. And they turned around and they started another one. And I'm actually an investor in their new company. So Phurnace started out as an interesting idea, and then we had to take it to market. The hardest part of Phurnace was finding and selling customers. It actually turns out, in hindsight, the easiest part was building the tool and making sure that it worked. The hardest part was finding paying customers for it. The marketing and the sales was much more of a challenge than the original design of the actual piece of software. So we exited that in 2009. I stayed around for a while at BMC to help them transition. Then I took some time off, and that's how I found Gazzang. So I'll just tell you the Gazzang name story, and then I'll give you the mic back for your next question. But did that answer your question about Phurnace? Okay. So a similar kind of story. There's a pattern here. I'm not sure if the pattern is I'm good at startups or that I just can't keep a job. One of those two is true. Two founders had invented a piece of technology, but couldn't get it to market, and quite frankly, they couldn't raise money. They had been turned down by a slew of VCs because they had no real business acumen, had no experience. It's unfortunate, but a lot of VCs want innovation, but some adult supervision at the same time. And quite frankly, I'm not pretending, it is what it is. I was sort of the adult supervision brought into Gazzang, quite frankly, and to make it a business, not just a cool idea. But when I got there, the company actually had a different name. It was called Cryto Tech. How many of you have seen the movie Office Space? And Initech and Global Novodyne. I was like, Cryto Tech? It sounds like a joke out of that movie. I don't like that. I don't even know, what does it mean? There's this convoluted, one of Plato's students was named Cryto, and there's a methodology to attack it. I'm like, oh, nah. This was when companies like Tumblr, Twitter, Pinterest, Google, Flickr, I said, we need something that's, not 1994. We need something modern, that's nonsensical, consonants in the wrong place, doesn't mean anything, because, what if we decide that what we're building is wrong and we got to do something else? So let's not call it Encryption Inc., because what if the encryption product doesn't work? We got to do something else, so we're kind of stuck with the bad name. So I said, we need to come up with a name that sounds more modern and is in line with a lot of the web companies that you hear about, but means absolutely nothing. So in case idea one doesn't work, we don't have to change the company name. And we can save money by not having to throw out all the business cards. So we looked at everything and played. We were on whiteboards, coming up with names. We came up with all kinds of zany things. Everything is taken. So if any of you have started a company, wait till you have to name it. It's really freaking hard. Because not only is the name taken, but someone's already landed on the domain, and you got to go pay them for it. Because they're just domain sitters, bastards. But that's all they're doing. You've seen it. So we went back and forth. So we came up with a crazy cool name that we really loved, and we tested it on people, and everybody loved it. And then, I can't remember, it was like one of my daughter's buddies said, hey, that is so, it was like a football game, or a tailgate party here in Aggieland. And I was telling him the story, and he said, yeah, you just make sure that, whatever name you pick, you go look it up in Urban Dictionary. I'm like, Urban Dictionary? What's Urban Dictionary? He goes, dude, you need to check it. So I typed our word in Urban Dictionary. Oh my God. Not the name that we want for our company, that. I didn't even know you could do that to an orangutan, let alone get a name for it. Whoa. So, message there. Come up with your company name, look in Urban Dictionary. It might mean something wholly unexpected. We were caught off guard. So finally, the way we came up with Gazzang is I got so frustrated. I said, everybody go home. I don't have to go to the library. You go online. Look at old comic books and find a sound of somebody punching somebody or somebody falling off a roof. And the word Gazzang was out of a comic book of a guy punching another guy, and we added the extra Z, and that's where the name came from. So it means absolutely nothing. Thank God nobody had it. We did find out about 4 months later that there was a little unknown boy band in Japan that also had the name. But the good news is that we had enough content on the web, we pushed them down into SEO rankings. And so they disappeared to about page 6. But if you ever see the boy band out of Tokyo named Gazzang, that's not us. Okay.
Awesome. Well, some good advice on naming a company there. So shifting gears a little bit, what's been the toughest part of being an entrepreneur?
The toughest part is to stay focused on the vision and the dream that you have with all the distractions that come up. There'll be a lot of naysayers, and so you really have to kind of get the core belief of what you're trying to do and stick through it with a lot of people, even your investors potentially telling you no. So I'd say that first thing is to stay focused on the task at hand. I do some advising for other startups, and I judge pitch competitions, etc., where I'll come in and help. They have something in Austin called the Capital Factory, which is an incubator. It's a for-profit incubator, so this is great that you guys can do this one. And I meet a lot of companies, and a lot of times with the entrepreneurs and founders, I see what I call shiny object syndrome, that they're working on something, and then something pops up over here, and then that's going to be the holy grail. Then something pops up over here, and that's going to be the holy grail. So they never really make forward momentum on any one thing. They just move a lot of ideas and inch forward. So I'd say that's, first of all, the toughest part. The next is more practical. Raising money. You read every day, VC spending on the rise, the Investors Day, there's going to be an Investor Day here in April. You might have a really cool guest. I don't know if they know it or not yet, but then there's going to be investors from professional venture capital. And you only hear the stories of the ones that get funded. So back to the gentleman that kicked us off and bought the pizza. I don't think he's making that up, that he's seen 500 business plan or deals. I don't think he made that number up. I can believe that. And probably, at the end of the day, less than 20 probably will receive some amount of professional venture. So raising money's hard, and so don't underestimate how much time it will take. Make sure you have someone on your team that has some degree of business acumen, because the VCs are bankers, and they're going to ask financial questions. And you need to, maybe it's an advisor. You don't have to give away a bunch of the stock to get a founder, but you better have an advisor that you trust that is good at financing, because you're going to get a lot of questions. Next thing on venture funding is there's actually quite a bit of seed money out there. So do I need to explain what seed funding is? Just a show of hands? No? Okay, so seed round is your first round. And what usually happens in the seed round is you don't set the value of your company. It's usually in the form of a convertible debt that turns into equity at a future date once there's a real company there. So a lot of seed funding is actually what's called convertible debt. Then after your seed funding, which is just to see if there's a there there, then you raise the Series A. Why is it called A? Because it's the first. And the second one's called B. The third one's called C, D, E, F. The reason they don't call it round 1, 2, 3, 4 is that the round itself will have a number of how much you're raising. It'd be confusing if you're doing the third round for $4 million. So is it the fourth round or the third round? It's the third round. So they use the letters so it's not confusing. So there's actually a lot of seed money out there and quite a bit of A. B's are incredibly hard to get, and C's are relatively easy to get if you have a real business. So the cool thing about what you guys are doing with entrepreneurial and startup and what Google has done in this whole initiative is there is a lot of seed money out there from 50 to 250K that you could get your hands on to let your idea mature and develop a bit. But overwhelmingly, I think one of the difficult things that a lot of founders or entrepreneurs underestimate is the amount of effort and time it takes to raise capital.
Okay, so how has your marketing degree been used to your advantage or disadvantage throughout your career?
Well, if Dean Strasser from the business school was here and I said, well, my marketing degree was a disadvantage, he'd probably, it has not been a disadvantage. But as all of you can understand, you will not become a true professional at your chosen career from the classes that you take here in undergraduate. You'll get a good foundation and pay attention, because I did learn fundamentals of go-to-market, fundamentals of distribution channel, and the basic terminology, the lingo of marketing. Product, place, price, the various P's which they pound in you. It actually is important to know that. So it created a good foundation, but wherever you go, whether you take a job in an established company or you start a company, it's on-the-job training when you really learn the skill set. So what I believe, this may be controversial, but I'm the one sitting in the chair, so I can say what I want. If I look back at A&M, what I got out of my business degree was the habits and behavior of how to learn. Because new things keep coming at me that I have to dig in and learn. And what you learn in college is how to learn quickly and a lot of material and pull the nuggets out. Because if you really think of some of the textbooks you get and what you really retain, it's micro small. That's okay, because that's a good skill set, is to absorb a massive amount of information and boil it down to the few things that actually matter. So I think that was more about going to college than specifically my marketing degree. Definitely the marketing helped me, but the ability to sit in a class on a subject that you really know nothing about and be able to take out of it a handful of nuggets, that's a skill you should develop. Because wherever you go, if you go to Hewlett-Packard, if you go to ExxonMobil, you go to Schlumberger, you go to Accenture, they're going to train you on their stuff. Trust me. They're going to say, this is how Accenture does it, and this is what we need to know, and here are some things. This is how we do income statements, and this is why the balance sheet is important. And if you haven't learned what in the hell a balance sheet is, then you're going to look like a jackrabbit. So the core lingo of your industry, that's what you can take out of college more than anything else. The fundamental working terminology.
Okay, in your eyes, how is the startup world changing?
Startup world changing. So some of it was what I've actually said is there's a lot more capital available, but there's also, and I'm not just saying this to give a plug to the event and the pizza, but there's infrastructure and a support system now for entrepreneurs. That didn't exist 10 years ago. There weren't incubators 10 years ago. There weren't startup grinds. There weren't pitch camps. There weren't TechStars, which is a program that's all over the country, which is a fast, like 14-week, hell-on-wheels program that teaches you how to get your business off the ground, after you've done something like this. Just in Austin alone, there's a similar program, not too dissimilar to this, called the Austin Technology Incubator. It's actually administered by the University of Texas School of Business, Macomb School of Business. But there's also Capital Factory, TechStars, Startup Camp. There's a bunch of that. None of that used to exist. So I think you're really fortunate that there's a support system and infrastructure where you can ask questions. Again, the gentleman that introduced the night, he said, come and ask questions. Do that. So many entrepreneurs that I know that have built their business didn't have anyone that offered assistance and said, hey, I'll answer your questions. I'll take a look at your pitch. I'll give you feedback, whether that makes sense or if it's stupid. Take the feedback. Back in the day, to go get help like that, it would cost you dearly. And you'd have all these people orbiting around your company with their hands out trying to get stock in your company to help you build a website. Really? No, it's better to just borrow money from your brother to build a $5,000 website than to get 2% off your cap table for someone. So guard your stock like it is a piece of your body. Don't go throwing it around. I've seen that. This wasn't part of the question. How many people have seen the movie, the original, Dumb and Dumber? Okay, they get all the money, and he's coming out of the Ferrari, and he's $100 here, and he's just throwing that money everywhere. You know that scene? I see a lot of entrepreneurs in Austin do that with stock. Just, oh, my attorney's helping me out. Here's 1,000 shares. Oh, this guy's helping me out. Here's 500 shares. Oh, this guy's helping me out. 2,000 shares. Then all of a sudden they go to raise their first round of funding, and the venture capital says, okay, so the dilution is all coming out of you. So after I give you money, you as the founder now own 52% of the company. You're like, oh? What happened? Well, dude, you gave 12% of it away to Aunt Jenny, to your brother, to your lawyer, to an artist that drew your logo. Protect your stock. Be really careful who you let on your cap table. But back to the question. What's new in the startup world is that support infrastructure is more available. And also, so now I'm going to sound kind of, wax poetic for a second. I love that entrepreneurialism now has all the attention in this country and is the cool thing to do. The cool kids are doing it. Okay, that is not always the case. And you hear politicians, businesses, and universities actually talk about entrepreneurialism. I think there's an entrepreneurialism track in the School of Business here. There's a school in Austin called the Acton MBA program. It's an MBA in entrepreneurship. It's a fantastic, very small school. I love that there's all this conversation because I'm a huge believer that is the only thing that will pull this country out of the economic malaise that we're in. Is that we have got to build new jobs, and new jobs come only from entrepreneurial businesses. To put this in context, this is what's so cool about what you're about to do. Every company that you can name, every one of them, at one time was a startup. IBM, startup, formed by two guys. Hewlett and Packard, two men. They actually made an oscilloscope to help the Disney company make a cartoon. That was their first product. Hewlett Packard made an oscilloscope to help synchronize frames in making cartoons for Disney. Hewlett and Packard. Apple, Levi Strauss, Google, all of these at one time were a four-person startup. Ford Motor Company, General Motors. Think about that for a second. So you think of, well, startups are this unique thing. No, it's everything. Every business on the planet, from Rolls-Royce aircraft engines to Google, was started by an entrepreneur, maybe a long time ago, and a team of dedicated individuals. So that right now, in a garage, in a basement, in a dorm room, a company that will dwarf Google is being created right now. Absolutely will dwarf Google. Because when I was growing up in your place, no one, at first when I started my career, no one could fathom how anyone could possibly break the hold of IBM on the entire compute industry. And Microsoft came out of nowhere and redefined computing. Only 10 years ago, VCs, stockbrokers could not fathom how any company on the planet could ever challenge Microsoft's dominance and reign on the software industry. And then Google happened. And it usually comes out of left field. Because I remember, I was in Silicon Valley when Google was getting funding, and I lived out there, and I knew venture capitalists had passed. Google had 22 VCs say no. And then they built a search engine, and now they have a fleet of cars that takes pictures of the planet, and they've got drones, and they're, who would have saw that company? So now you think, God, Google, how will that ever be challenged? Same thing with Apple. When the iPhone came out, everybody said, game over. The smartphone industry is dominated, done, the innovation is dead, and then Android happened. Android, just 6 months ago, passed Apple in install base. And what's interesting about Android is it's device independent. So now you've got all these hardware manufacturers, Samsung, Nokia, Motorola, building devices. So what I think is cool about startups now is it's now, there's funding for it, and the society and your education system is encouraging you to do it. But get ready in just, when you go to your Texas A&M 5-year reunion, okay, so just think about that. When you get to go to your Aggie 5-year reunion, there will be a new company getting buzz that would potentially put Google out of business. You're like, ah, no, it'll never happen. Trust me, it's going to happen. And that's what's so exciting about how the startup world is different today, is we can build these companies, and not to be too overly political, I really think it's the hope and future of the economy to get it fired up again. Because General Motors, so here's an interesting statistic. Okay, does anybody remember how many people work at Gazzang? Does anybody remember from my early thing? 40, correct. Gazzang hired more new employees last year than General Motors. I created more jobs than General Motors, and I did not get shit for a bailout. Just saying. Not pissed. Sent my letter in, no one's responding. The way to create jobs is not to pour more money into IBM, General Motors, Ford, where the innovation is going to come and the jobs. Now, I won't hire 10,000 people, but my 40 times the 10,000 other companies hiring 40, that's how you get employment back up. So, sorry for the political speech.
Piece of advice you could give any young entrepreneur.
Get used to drinking lots of red wine. No, that's probably inappropriate enough. Some of you are probably underage. No, best advice, and that's really tough. I knew Christopher was going to ask me this, but I've given this a lot of thought. I guess the best advice is to be patient. Don't get frothed up when you hear all the stories of an overnight success, or you see someone else get funding, or you see Snapchat turn down a $600 million offer, and you're like, oh my God. Don't get envious of those activities of the entrepreneurs that are in parallel. Stay the course and build your company inch by inch, because the truly great companies are actually just a bunch of inches put together over time. And so if you focus on just getting something done each and every week that moves you just an inch closer to your objective and goal, you'll look up one day and you'll say, wow, we've really made momentum. Don't think that the secret to success is that you've got to just, you get up to the plate one time, you get one pitch, and you have to hit it over the fence. That's really not how it happens. You can win a lot of games, base hit after base hit. In fact, if any of you have ever read the book Moneyball, if you haven't, you might have seen the movie, go back and read the book, because it's really interesting how an underdog in a crowded market, a baseball team with players, broke through the open A's by taking a different approach and literally built a winning team on base hits, not on over-the-fence home runs. So I know that's kind of fluffy, and it was hard to be a very specific best advice for someone that's done it before. And by the way, I've had failures too. I'm not here saying everything I've touched, I've turned to gold. We have jacked up some things that we thought were going to work, and they went sideways. But you fail fast, and you adjust, and get back on building something, and go one more inch farther. So in a nutshell, the best advice is be patient and try to build your great idea inch by inch, not 100 miles at a time.
Awesome. Okay, well now we'll open it up for a little Q&A. So just raise your hand and we'll get some questions going.
Yeah. What advice do you have? Do you have any go-to partners whenever you're thinking of a new idea, new venture? And what advice would you give somebody who's developing a company with somebody new? And when I say that, I mean more. Do you have any?
Right. Okay. So I'm going to repeat the question just in case the film thing didn't pick it up. The question was, do you have any go-to partners or people that you could run ideas off of or bounce off of when you're building a company to get advice and get guidance and maybe even mentorship? Do I have some, and what advice can I give you to get some? So the answer is yes, 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 yes. One of the most important critical things you can do in the early stage of a startup business is create a set of both formal and informal advisors around you, and you must trust them. That's, don't go out and pay for them. Look for people to fill in the holes of what you don't have. So if you are building a software company and you're a developer, you need an advisor that has marketing and sales and finance. So fill in the holes of what you don't have with an ecosystem of even informal advisors and advice. Also, ask. Don't be shy. Go up and just, if you know of someone, send an email, send a FedEx, send a letter, at a conference corner them, and just ask. I remember when I was much younger, one of my business heroes is a guy named Herb Kelleher. He's a founder and CEO of Southwest Airlines. Totally upset the airline industry. Everybody said, new airline, that's stupid, that'll never work. This is how airlines work. And we said, well, you know, actually, we're going to do it a little bit different. And Southwest, as you know, is wildly successful. But I went to an event at a Marriott hotel, and he spoke. And I just wedged myself up into the crowd, and I asked him a very pointed, direct question. He gave me a pointed piece of advice after the fact. So don't be afraid to go ask questions and seek out people. One of the things that I think Startup Aggieland will do as it matures, this is still early, is build an ecosystem of people you can turn to. And that's one of the reasons for it. So leverage that and push, you know, the organizers is, man, you know, all these people keep coming in and talking about protect the cap table. I don't know what a cap table is. Can we have a lunch and learn or a session on what is a cap table and how does it work? Because that's your capital allocation table. It's basically how the ownership of your company is divvied up after you get financing. So ask a lot of questions, and yes, I still to this day, as a serial CEO, a serial entrepreneur, I've taken one company public. That was in California in 1996. And I've been involved in 2 acquisitions to date. And this one that I'm at now would either be an IPO or an acquisition when we have more success. But I still need help and advice. And so I built kind of a small orbit of groups that will do it. Also, if you do get investors, they're some of the best places to turn to advice because now they're in the boat with you and they want to help you. So they might not have the answer to the question, but they've got a network of somebody that does, and they'll go out of their way to surround you with smart people on a topic. Did that help?
I was more, yeah.
Well, you may ask another question.
I was more like, I was more looking towards how do you work out equity within the company when you part with somebody. And I just realized my mistake as you were talking.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So his follow-on question was, for instance, how would you decide how to break out equity in your company when you're just getting started? So it actually turns out attorneys are the ones that do that. And you need to find in your ecosystem someone that knows a venture attorney that will spend a little time with you for free to explain the fundamentals. And if you really work your network, you'll find someone that will agree to help without billing you the $350 an hour. Because that's, you may not know that, that's a marginal attorney is $350 an hour. The good ones are $700, $800 an hour. And so you don't need to be spending your money now as an early stage company paying $350 an hour for an attorney. Ooh, we got a snazzy law firm. I see a lot of, hey, we're going to get Wilson Sonsini, which is a fantastic firm, but what? You know, they represent Apple. Find a friend of a friend. Now, don't go to a divorce attorney or a real estate attorney because somebody's brother. You need a venture attorney that does it. And someone in your network will be able to find an attorney, they'll take a phone call or have a coffee meeting to give you some advice. You just got to ask. What the worst thing, have any of you ever had an actual sales job where you had to sell something by asking somebody, will you buy this from me? Raise your hand if you've ever done that. Okay, not that many. Because unfortunately, we all think of sales as the person that sells you that car, which is really pretty scary. When I go to buy a car, I introduce the guy and I say, that magic guy in the back that you go talk to, bring him out here. That's the guy I want to talk to. Because if you tell me you got to go back and talk to him, I'm following you back there. I don't want to talk to you. They hate that. My wife never goes, by the way. She's like, you embarrass me. I will not buy her. My point being is, you got to ask. You just got to ask. And the worst thing that could happen is they say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have time. I understand. Do you have a suggestion of who else I may ask? Yeah, you should ask. So always follow a no with another question if they can help you get to who you want. Okay? I'll just hold the microphone a second. Gentleman right there in the glasses.
So you said selling the product or service is the toughest part of,
Yep.
of a startup, and it seems like you bought into several of the ventures for your business acumen.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that a little bit? So what holes did you specifically fill in these startups that the founders that actually founded the business didn't have?
Right, so the question was around selling and marketing, and I've been brought in to do that. That doesn't mean all founders aren't good at it. There are a lot of founders that are wicked smart at doing that, but the founders I've been associated with, and it's probably what I gravitate toward, is technical founders without marketing and sales experience, and they have a gaping hole in their team. Again, the founders don't have to do it, but if you don't have anyone involved in your circle of friends and advisors that has experience in marketing and selling, you need to go get it. Because you have to figure out what's right to sell your product. It's not universal. So if you're going to be selling in an app store, you want an advisor that has had success in an app store. It's very different than the way we sell. We sell directly on calling the Fortune 500 companies. That isn't going to work for Angry Birds. It's not going to work for everything. So what you want to do is find someone with sales and marketing experience in the way you're going to go to market. You may sell it out of a trailer, you may sell it out of retail, you may sell it online. They're not bad models. All models, it's just the right model for the right product. And so for my career personally, it tends to be where my background is, so I get sought out for that experience. I would never be sought out from a founding team looking for my guidance on the next development language to use to go onto mobile phones. There are people and advisors that could give you that guidance, but this isn't me. So you've got to have someone related to the company, even if it's an advisor or a friend, that has some experience of going to market. The good news is most VCs or angel investors, that's exactly what they're good at. They've got that. Did that help?
So most of your experience has been going to market with Fortune 500 companies?
Yeah, most of my experience, that's a really good point. My experience is dominated by taking a higher end enterprise class software product to enterprise buyers, so Fortune 500 for a large ticket price. The thing is that you probably don't know this, but the very largest software companies in the world you've never heard of, because they don't sell to you as college students. You know, you've heard of the gaming companies and the Google, but you know, how many of you have ever heard of SAP? Just a handful. They're one of the largest software companies in the world, based in Germany, and they make software that makes sure parts get shipped to places on time. Okay? One of the largest software companies in the world that has a huge range of products, but you'd never be exposed to, is not Microsoft, but it's Oracle. Oracle doesn't sell products to consumers, so they would never reach out and touch you. But Oracle is one of the biggest software brands in the world. In fact, their founder, I think, is the third or fourth wealthiest individual in the United States. And you guys don't know what their products do. I mean, how many have heard of Oracle? Okay. How many have heard of Larry Ellison? He also won the sailboat race, the Cup. Well, how many of you can actually describe to me 4 of his products? 1, database, okay. You have 265 different products. So anyway, find someone that has sales and marketing experience in the way you're going to go to market. Okay. Next question. Right next to you. Did you guys plan this colored shirt thing?
No. So whether it's a VC or a potential business partner, how do you motivate someone that you want to join you and help you? How do you motivate them to do that?
Okay, so the question was whether it's a VC or a business partner, how do you motivate them to join you? I mean, motivate to invest in you, or to help you out, or to be an employee? Which is it?
I guess either way, what do you do to, what's key to you in motivating someone to
Okay.
help you in what you're doing?
So if you found someone or some organization that you think needs to be close to your company, and you're trying to recruit them to help you, whether it's take a job with you, invest in you, or just give you guidance, right? You need to get them as excited with your vision and value proposition as you are, because you need them to buy into it. Because if they don't have that same level of passion and belief that you are, they are going to constantly tell you that you are flat out wrong. And that gets really, really annoying. It's good to have opposing views, but if they want to join your company, you're on a mission. I mean, we've all heard the story of when Cortez came to the New World. To make it very clear to the sailors they weren't going back, they burned the boats. He said, now there's no debate of when departure time is. We don't got any boats. We're going into the mountains. They're like, we're in, because the only way to survive is to go with the guns and the food into the mountains. So I would say to recruit, you've got to find organizations that believe what you do as well. and then make sure you understand what's the value they're going to bring, and be very, very specific what they're going to do for you, and make sure you have an agreement on what they're going to do for you.
How do you overcome shiny object syndrome?
Have you overcome shiny object syndrome? Squirrel. You guys ever see that movie Up? Yeah, great movie. There's a lot of people like that. I think what you do is you look at it from the customer's perspective in front of the solution perspective. What are you trying to solve or enable? Are you trying to solve a fundamental problem and your product or service solves the problem? Or are you trying to enable some kind of a response? If you're making a restaurant, are you trying to create an experience that would be enjoyable to them? Stay focused on what is it that you're trying to deliver through the eyes of that organization or person that's going to use it. The diner, the gamer, the business that's going to buy your stuff. And if you stay focused on what you're trying to actually do, it'll keep you from chasing shiny objects, because even if it is shiny and it still is in line with solving that problem, it's probably not a distraction for you to look at it. But if it's a totally different problem for a different user, that's a shiny object syndrome where you're now over here. So get a hypothesis of what you're trying to solve or what you're trying to provide. You know, you're trying to provide it. You know, games don't solve anything, but they provide an enjoyable experience for fill in the blank. 19-year-old boys, 32-year-old housewives. You got to be specific on who's it for. And then whenever an object pops up, is it in the context of doing a better job of what you already agreed of what you're trying to do? So that's the way. It's put yourself in the perspective of who you're trying to do it for. Yes?
Mr. Warnock, I'm taking a look at Gazzang, and I would like to, if you could share a nugget with the group about your excitement about Gazzang. You got excited, I think, for joining them.
Yep.
And so if someone was to emulate Gazzang to get you excited about joining them,
Right.
what was that thing that, and how many people can you touch with Gazzang? Was that one of the things that
Yeah, great question. It's kind of like a test. Are you with one of my investors? Hold on, I didn't see an ID here. No. That's a great question. So let me tell you a little bit about the Gazzang story and why we're passionate about it. So first of all, what we're doing is protecting privacy of people. It's not just privacy of companies' information, it's individuals' information. So when you go to get cancer research at the University of Michigan, they collect a tremendous amount of data about you and your cancer. And our software protects that for prying eyes so that does not become public knowledge. It's none of anyone's business but yours. When Intel invented a new technology, they wanted to make sure it was not stolen specifically by overseas bad players, other countries. So they encrypt it and protect it, and it is fundamentally securing their ideas so that they can monetize the ideas, not some country stealing it and getting all the benefit. So the first is the mission is we're about keeping the information in the hands of those who truly own it and not others. Second, the way we do it is at the intersection of two very interesting market dynamics that are new. And so what we're doing is novel, and it's not being done by anybody else. And I'll try not to get too technical on you, but you'll get the general gist. There's this thing emerging called cloud computing. One of your big sponsors, Rackspace, is one of the largest cloud providers in the United States, behind Amazon, AWS, Amazon Web Services. Cloud computing lets you basically rent computing horsepower versus buy it. It's a crazy model that is turning the compute industry upside down, and it is making massive compute problems available to startups with 3 people. Because you can now spin up the computing horsepower that would have cost you $1 million only 2 years ago. You can spin it up for 4 days, get your answer, and then turn it off. Make up $100. That's game changing. So you know how you all get your electricity, right? It comes through a bunch of wires from some power plant somewhere. You don't know which power plant it is, actually. And then it goes through a meter, and the meter spins, and you get charged based on how fast that thing spins. That's cloud computing. It's a new business model that you only use what you only pay for what you use. That's game changing. So this whole new series of companies are going to emerge that do computing in the cloud, and we secure data in that cloud. So there's a new market building that didn't even exist 4 or 5 years ago. The second thing is that we specifically go after a certain type of data that we're really frickin' good at protecting. And it's referred to as big data. Has anybody heard the buzz of big data? It's also referred to as NoSQL, which means not only SQL. In a nutshell, there's been some new technologies for database storing and queries that can now handle at rapid pace terabytes or petabytes of data. So I don't know if you grasped that. I think I saw a statistic that up until 2008, in human civilization had created a petabyte of information. We now create a petabyte every 22 minutes. It's just a crazy amount of data. So there's new databases that are built to handle that massive data, and our software uniquely is tuned for those. So as the big data market grows and the cloud computing market grows, our investment theory is that those are waves. We're in a surfboard, and if we don't F this up, we'll ride it to the shore.
That's exactly the answer I was looking for, sir, was the wave.
The wave.
You were looking at the wave to ride it, so what I'm
So we found a problem in two interesting waves that are sort of joining together, because a lot of these big data implementations are in the cloud. Just a side, like, which should be an interesting nugget for you at a cocktail party or a barbecue party, since you're not supposed to have cocktails. This big data structures came out of these massive web companies like Amazon and Google. So Google has, I don't know the number, but it's hundreds of thousands of servers spread around the world. And when you go to type in a query, are you not amazed that it's finding things before you're done typing? You're 6 letters in, and it's already sorting results. So they had to build a proprietary database to do that. And all these big data engines that are coming out in the open source world came from those companies. They invented it because it didn't exist. So back to the point is, find a wave and ride it. You can, occasionally entrepreneurs can create a wave. Bill Gates was a wave creator. That is unique in the course of history, that you can create a wave. Most entrepreneurs are wicked smart about seeing a wave and getting on it and riding it. And that's what we're doing at Design. So let me get another person first now. We got, what, 5 minutes? Okay. This guy.
Hi, so you talked about exit plans, IPO, acquisitions. I forget where I read it, and a lot of private equity firms, they have this model that they need an exit plan before they go into something. Would you say it's kind of the same thing with a startup? You already have an exit plan before you've even gone into the development phase and starting your own business?
It's a good question. For the camera, the question was, should you have an exit plan before you even start building the business? I think you have ideas about an exit, but if the only reason you're doing it is to get an exit to make some money to buy a fancy car, it's probably not going to work, because it's really hard, and there's actually other jobs you can get that pay really well to get a good car, and it's really hard because a lot of them fail. So your plan has to be on an exit, but you as founders should be able to answer the question to a potential investor, where could this potentially go? Does it have enough oomph to get into the public markets? And based on whatever the market is at that time, right now it's about 70 million in top line revenue, profitable, or an eye to profitability relatively soon. Could you get it that big? Could you see $70 million per year of your stuff being sold? No. Okay, then it's not an IPO. So who are potential acquirers? Have you thought about it? Are you aware of that? Are you going to build relationships with them as they go forward? So I think you should be cognizant of what the potential path is. But quite frankly, it's the investor's job to hear your story and do that math on their own and understand what the trajectory is for that exit. But you should definitely think about it so that you don't make bonehead moves. And for instance, if you're developing software, that's just what I know. if we're developing software and we make an engineering decision to do a programming language that all of a sudden narrows our potential exits. So if I decide to only build a platform on what's called .NET, that's Microsoft, then I've chosen my path. Is if I'm not acquired by Microsoft, I'm kind of screwed. I don't have a plan B and C. So the reason you want to think about potential exits is so that you don't make mistakes in building the company that knock you out of the running for who potential acquirers are. The last thing I'll say of this is that when you take angel, VC, or private equity money, it's all venture capital, quite frankly, just different stages. Understand there's only 2 ways for them to get their money back. Go public, so they can liquidate their assets on the public market, or be acquired so someone else buys them. VCs have no interest in you building a business that grows at 20% a year and spits off a dividend or revenue. That's not what they're going for. They have to have you go public or eventually be acquired to return the money to the fund. So when you take professional venture money, you are on a trajectory of going public or being acquired, period. Those are the only 2 outcomes they have any interest in at all. And so know about that. And I'd actually use this kind of as a closing, and I'll be up here and I'll take individual questions if you guys want to come up here, but kind of as a closing thing. Venture capital is not right for every business. You don't have to say, unless I get VC money, this won't work or I won't be successful. There are other ways to raise money and other forms of capital and debt that might be better tuned for your business. If you can try to bootstrap it first with friends, family, credit card, and a little bit of revenue as you go, and protects the cap table longer, you might have an investor that wants a long-term horizon and just wants to share in the spoils. For instance, a lot of restaurants, all the investors are looking for is a return of their cash and then some kind of kicker of 10% a year for the next 5 years. Because if you think about it, very few restaurants actually get acquired. The ones that do are great success stories. If you think of the tens of thousands of restaurants in this country, how many are going to get acquired? It's actually very few. So that's why VCs don't do restaurants, because it's not the model to get acquired. So think about the type of capital, but don't get yourself so wedded that it has to be venture capital to build your business, because there are other ways to do it besides that. Thank you for your time. I'll stay up here for any questions. I appreciate the invite, and I hope you got a nugget or 2 out of this.